Hello, everybody. Welcome to This is Effing Hard. If you haven't listened before, this is a podcast launched earlier this year by Martin Sutton and I. And the purpose of the podcast really is to shine a light on those people who are working to build a company or have built a company. It could be founders, it could be senior leaders, a range of different responsibilities and roles. But certainly in season 2, we are trying to focus as much as we can on the founders and co-founders of businesses and the stories that they can share around what they're doing now, the challenges they've gone through. And really, I guess the purpose of this is to give a really honest account of what it's like when you're in the trenches and trying to build something, going through the challenges that you might go through. Today I am joined by Andrew Okun. Andrew and I have known each other now for about 4 years, I think, just over 4 years. I actually worked with Andrew originally as a candidate, placing him into a fantastic organization called Ben. And I remember at the time when we were going through that process that he had this kind of side hustle business that was going on, that there was actually questions were asked in the interview process around like what that was and whether that was going to be impacting on you joining as a full-time employee. And actually that is another conversation. We'll probably cover that off in a bit, but I've worked with lots of companies who've been really put off by that and actually have said no to that. And madness really in my eyes, because as long as you're doing both really well and there's a good reason for both, then why not be able to combine them? Because there's so many of the attributes that you need to be successful in working in an early stage company come from being entrepreneurially invested and good mindset and everything else. So anyway, that's the background. Andrew is now the founder of that business, where that business has now become his full-time sole focus alongside his co-founder. And today we're going to talk about his journey, his background, where he is today, what they're doing, the challenges that he's been through, and hopefully cover some really interesting topics. Andrew, thank you for joining me.
That was me.
To begin with, tell us a bit about what you're doing right now.
Cool. So yeah, I'm like to echo what you said. I'm one of the co-founders of MILHUB. So that's the company I'm running. Essentially, we're a property company. We focus on creating community-led housing for not only professionals but also families. Families is more recently in terms of our approach. So initially, when we started out, we were doing rent-to-rent HMOs, which is essentially where you lease HMO buildings from landlords, and because they're already HMOs, you can focus on managing them, but subletting the rooms out to working professionals. And then we've now evolved over time to also doing that to single let housing, to work alongside the council, like local authorities, to help them with placing families there, essentially vulnerable tenants as well. So we've been doing that primarily. We started out that in Reading, expanded out to Manchester, where a lot of our portfolio has been, so more in the northwest of England. And to answer your question, more of what I'm doing now is really focusing on scaling. So where we managed to take MilHub to is a point where I could no longer juggle my full-time job as well as building MilHub on the side, as you call it. And now the focus is on really taking it to that next stage, looking at how we can expand to different areas across the UK, but also winning on new business, growing out the team, and really just going into the next stage in terms of MilHub's journey.
Love it. We'll come on to talking about MilHub again in a bit. I'd love to delve into a little bit more around why that business and where the future direction of it is. But whenever we do these interviews, I always like to start off by asking a few kind of foundational questions,
Sure.
which are fairly standard, but I think it's interesting to understand where you once were in life and where you are today. Growing up, what two questions. What were you career wise? Where did you think you might be, or where did you want to be? What were the kind of ideas that you had in your head? And also, along those kind of like early formative years, who, if anyone, was really influencing you?
It's a good question, actually. I always take a moment to look back into that younger version of myself because probably as a child, like any kid, as a young boy, playing football was one of the main things I wanted to do. I didn't know how I was going to make a career of it. I wouldn't say I was the greatest, but I was pretty good. Like I had the trophies to show it as well and winning all those tournaments. But I think going into secondary school, or high school, as some people would understand it as, I was really into maths and I was also into art as well, which
Okay.
is strange, right? You have
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the analytical mind, but I was also very creative, and I think that's how I've become. And it probably will it will start to reveal itself more as we continue to speak. But I was really good at drawing, and when I was a child, I used to love drawing cars. I always had a dream that I was gonna be a car designer, or I'll create my own car. So you could call it Elon Musk as you want, would call it. But I really was inspired by doing that. My mum used to always get me pictures of cars, and I would just draw them all day long, drawing a lot. So something I liked picking up. Well, I picked up later on down the line, and the reason being is because I loved solving problems, like seeing equations, seeing a formula, and then applying it to different situations and finding the solution to that problem. And I that used to give me so much fulfillment. But I was also competitive in it as well. So there was all these things that were coming together, but I never knew how to apply it to a career. I was just this kid finding himself and just had different interests. And I think when I disqualified the car designer dream, if you want to call it that, was I actually left my coursework that I had done for the last 2 years on the bus in a week before my exam, which was like the most disheartening moment. I remember going home so chuffed and infused about going home to finish off my coursework ahead of my exams, and I got home, realized that I only had my backpack on me, but I didn't have my coursework because that's not something I carried around with me all the time. So just out of routine, I picked up my bag but left my coursework on the bus. Called the bus company, couldn't find it, couldn't retrieve it. Had to go and break the news to my art teacher the following day,
Oh,
and
wow.
you could literally see everything in terms of a reaction on her face, which was her true reaction, but the words that she was
Eh.
saying was just trying to console me. But she known in that moment that, yeah, this kid has failed. There's no way that he's going to pass or
Oh,
make up for
wow.
2 weeks, 2 years worth of coursework. So
Yeah.
I think with the mentality and mindset I had now, I probably would have looked at that this situation very differently. But at that point, I thought, forget art or doing anything along those lines.
So
And
how old are you then?
I was 15.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I don't think any 15-year-old really handles that well.
Yeah, yeah. So you just accept that, okay, this is it. Not
Yeah.
that you have to, but that's just how I felt in that moment. But to answer your question in terms of what I wanted to do, I didn't really know. I think I was just
Mm.
exposed to a number of things, and I like doing different things. I like doing different sports. I went to a sports college that helped there. I ended up studying politics because I was really interested in current affairs. So you can see
Mm.
a guy that loves maths, very creative, also interested in current affairs. It was You could almost say I was a bit of a confused kid, right, at the same time, but I had a lot of interests. So I didn't know how to focus that into a career as such. And to be
Yeah.
fair, at the point when you're tasked with making a decision of what direction you wanted to go in, I still didn't know. But the way the education system works is pretty much, if even if you don't know, you just go with the flow. But
Yeah.
I didn't really want to go with this flow. Um, but I'd say what had the biggest influence on my career to date was when I was 20 years old. So this is while I was studying politics and still not really sure if this was the career I wanted to take. I
Mm.
had just come back from studying in France for about 7 or 8 months it was, and I met a multimillionaire. This is the first, I wouldn't say it's the first time I met one, but knowingly meeting one and being able
Yeah,
to have a
yeah, yeah,
conversation about their life and their career path. And they were previously an investment banker, and I had two older cousins in my family that were investment bankers, like the shining light of the family, all A stars,
yeah,
etc. So if you wanted to just follow the safe route, you could just copy them. But
yeah.
speaking to him, he went in a different route. He had done that career and was working in that job and decided to go out and pursue building a business. And just learning more about his story, that just lit a fire in me that I never knew I had. And I remember going home that day telling all my friends, guys, there's a different way to living out there. We don't have to just go to uni and graduate and just go and get a job. We can actually go out there and build our own business. Like, we need to go back to dreaming big. And I almost felt in that moment I went back to being that child that just had so many ideas and dreams of what it was possible. Like the kid that was
Yeah.
probably 5, 6 years old drawing pictures of cars, felt like anything was possible. So I'd say that was one of the biggest influences, or maybe even biggest moments I had in my career in terms of just changing the trajectory of where I was going and almost giving me clarity on what I wanted to do. I think that
Yeah.
was the best way of putting it for myself. So
What
yeah.
was the business? What did the investment banker do? Do you remember?
So he had an online marketing company. He first, I think the term was network marketing. He worked for a company called QI Group, and he was an independent seller there.
Yeah.
But he managed to do really well there. So it was pretty much 100% commission. And
Yeah.
he was just telling me, this is these are the foundational skills you need to learn in terms of operating your own business, which is sales. And that's what kind of got me into sales, because I saw this and
Yeah.
said, oh, this is something you need to have in business. And I think any business, you need to know how to sell. And if you don't know how to, someone in your team knows that needs to know how to.
Mm.
Um, but that clicked in my head immediately. It just made sense. It was very simple. It was straightforward advice. It wasn't trying to figure out what industry do you need to be in. It was just simply learn sales, and then you can figure out the rest later. And that's something that's stuck true to me still to this day. Learn sales. You could also say learn marketing as well, sales and marketing,
Yeah, of
and
course.
it will help you in any business or industry that you step into.
It's yeah, it's interesting because as you were talking, like the word that like came up in my head, and I hear it so much now. There are so many companies that focus on this when they're hiring, is curiosity. And if you're a curious kid, you're like maths, like if it's the problem solving, so there's a curiousness to understand how do I do this.
Yeah,
It's that exploratory mindset. Okay, that's interesting. Politics. Let's go and try that. There's even just we didn't even cover like how you met that investment banker millionaire, but just the fact that as a 20-year-old somehow your paths crossed, and there's a curiosity that comes through. And I do think that as somebody who has young children now and knows people who are in the education system, there is a there is an argument that says that the system, the way that it works at the moment, or the way that it's traditionally worked, actually, I think kills curiosity for so many kids
correct.
at a certain point because they just have to go down this path where they don't. The reality is, most 18-year-olds don't really. They choose their degree based on what. Very few actually have the clarity or the direction to go, I'm going to do that because I want to be that. That's the truth. And so the vast majority go and study for a degree based on some stuff that's not really, maybe they are curious in a topic. Maybe it's just a thing that they've been good at. Who knows? But
Yeah,
I think if it's interesting to me now that so many companies that I work with really target curiosity as being something that's incredibly important.
yeah,
And I get it. I just think we're not teaching it.
yeah. It goes back to the saying of asking a question why. Sometimes I felt like growing up, I was quite stifled with that question why. So
Mm,
my family heritage. They're from Nigeria, and they're
mm,
very, I could say, maybe conservative in terms of family values, in terms of respecting the order of roles in the household. So if I was made to do something, I'd ask the question why, and I would never get an answer as to why I'm allowed, or I'll get an answer, but it's not an answer I like, essentially. And it always happens. So eventually, that tells you, you know, it's not good to ask the question why. So when things are happening, it's just, oh, that's the way it's supposed to be. Just carry on as it is. Just accept it. But again, having that moment when I met the investment banker and he questioned a lot of things in the systems and why things this way, why should it be this way, why can't we do it that way? It just again lit that fire back inside me as that young kid that was so curious. I always used to ask questions, and I started seeing it in various things, because why I like designing things is because I was curious about what different designs could I do, what
hmm
different things could I come up with just even off the top of my head. With maths, it was curious about solving it, all these problems that I could solve whenever saw an equation. And I went from hating maths to absolutely loving it. So it's funny how like I could be on one end of the spectrum to the other end, and that's partly due to that curiosity and wanting to know more and seeing what I was capable of doing. And I feel that's part of my energy. That's where I draw a source of inspiration from today when it comes to having conversations with people. You just want to learn a little bit more about them. And you do that in sales as well, right? Like when you're finding, when you're having conversations with a prospect or a client, you're curious to understand their business, to understand what are some of their problems that they're having and how can you provide a solution to that problem that they have today. But in order to get to that point of providing the solution, you need to really understand, you need to have that curiosity about the problem in the first place.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a topic I'm really passionate about for all the reasons I just discussed. I think as once you, for those who have young children, I think once you do, you start to think about education again and go
Yeah.
through the process from a different lens. And sadly, like what I've seen so far is that not a huge amount has changed really over the course of 30 plus years from when I was like at school and even longer than that. But it's, yeah, it's an interesting topic. I'm interested to understand, and we talked about it a bit earlier, but I'm going to ask you a why question. Why the problem that you're solving, or that the sector that you're in? Like why?
Yeah, so good question. I guess it's a layered question in various ways. So, firstly, when I was younger, I used to love playing Monopoly. So, even just from a real estate property standpoint, I loved the game of Monopoly. I used to play it with my
Yeah.
friends quite often. And funny enough, these are some of the same friends I used to play with. We're all in property, but in different parts of it. So I love that aspect of it, in just the competitiveness of it and trying to win the game. But when it came to why MilHub even started,
Yeah.
I used to work as an estate agent for a
Mhm.
short period of time. I worked at Foxtons. My co-founder, who's also a
That's not
childhood
for the
friend.
faint-hearted, by the way, is it?
Yeah, it's not at all. I call it investment bankers for estate agents, but that's one thing, or estate agents for investment bankers, whichever way you want to frame it. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the main premise there was my co-founder as well, who's also a childhood friend. He worked as an estate agent, so he was at an independent estate agent, and we just saw the standard of the industry was very old school, like very
Mm.
archaic. And I, again, now having this curious mindset, I was questioning, why are things done this way? Why is it so laborious in terms of the process of people renting, or even the standard of the homes that people were renting from landlords? Why is it like that? Even though I sat on the sales side, I was very much looking at the letting side of the business and
Mhm.
thinking there's a lot of issues here. And people just really wanted to get into sales to just get into selling luxury properties. I was curious, and I was asking people on my team about, what would you change in lettings? Why? What are some of the issues you saw? And later, so I think it was about maybe about a year later, my co-founder actually went to an event where we came across somebody that had there's called Reza Merchant actually. He started a company called The Collective,
Mhm.
which was founded on the same foundation of our business in terms of rent to rent HMOs, but he did this because student living and lettings was a substandard at the time.
Mhm. Mhm.
And through the business of the collective, what he wanted to do was create a space where people could not only connect, but the standard of their housing or the space they lived in was able to facilitate conversations, but inspire them to meet new people, collaborate, build things, have workspaces within their home space, as opposed to just simply just having a room and a mattress and then just kind of figure it out and simply pay rent. And this relationship between the landlord and a tenant just didn't seem like a business owner and a customer. And I saw it from a business standpoint as the landlord should really be looking at a business as their property as a business, and
Mhm.
the tenant as a customer. And
Mhm.
that would help improve the relationship because it seemed so fragmented at the time. So with my business hat on at the time, I thought this is something I can do, which was low startup cost, but I could
Mm.
also go and I didn't have the money to go out and buy a number of properties to do this myself. But the way I could leverage this was actually approach landlords that already had these properties in place and speak to them about how we could change the way they viewed their property to make sure that it wasn't getting standard rates or standard rents. They were getting above market rates because they were uplifting the value of their property through the standard of how they designed it. And it
Mm.
was encouraging working professionals that really cared about the home and the space they lived in, because maybe they wanted to venture off and have a family and buy their own house. So they're going to take care of that space, but you also need to take care of them as well and have
Mm.
a certain standard of service. And also, you don't want to just match them with anybody. You want to make sure that there is care put into their onboarding, also throughout their time with you, and also their offboarding experience. But ultimately, I was drawn by the customer service element. Okay, you're
Yep.
serving the customer, and the serving the customer is the tenant, in this space. So that's how MilHub came about. We really focused on professionals. I was a working professional myself. I've also been a student, so I've been in shared spaces. So I've had first-hand experience. And I was like, what would have been better if I had lived in these spaces? And those were some of the things of just really feeling like I was cared for, as opposed to just simply paying rent and then not hearing from the landlord unless there's a maintenance issue, which is
Yeah,
obviously
yeah,
quite
yeah.
negative.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. And over the journey, obviously, it's been a side hustle, full time, etc. But
Yeah.
lots of challenges along the way. But
Mhm.
is there a point that you can reflect back on and think that was particularly hard? That was a really difficult point that we had to navigate.
In what sense do you mean more the?
So I guess running the business, like if you look at the challenges of growing something, there will be like pinch points through that. And sometimes with people, it's a capacity issue. Sometimes it's a finance issue. Sometimes it's a people issue. There are lots of, I find speaking to a lot of founders that they can reflect back at certain points and go, that was a really pivotal moment there. We had to do something differently because if we didn't, we might have been in a different situation. And so,
Yeah, I think in the first part, like when we were initially starting out, it was very hard, but primarily because you didn't know what you were doing. There was a bit of a playbook, but it wasn't a playbook. Like we didn't have
mm,
anyone that was guiding our hand. We just simply read a book somewhere and just said, okay, we'll figure it out. And that's what we did. I still recall when we were commissioned to acquire our first property by a landlord. And I was actually this is a previous job I had. I was sat in a job at work in the office, and my co-founder called me, and I kind of didn't want the deal to go through because I thought, oh, this is actually real now. We have to figure out what are the next steps from
yeah,
here because it's not like now where you can probably really go and chat GPT and ask it a bunch of questions and it might give you like 90% of what you need. Then it was like you can Google, but Google still didn't have the information laid out of what
yeah,
to do. So we had to figure it out as we went along. And um, in in the midst of going through it, it's really hard because you don't know. When you don't know what you don't know, you just feel lost. And looking back now, I'm more comfortable with the chaos as opposed to back then. I wasn't at all. It was trying to figure out what are we supposed to do here, managing budgets, project managing contractors as well. You start learning how contractors in the property space are very different to maybe in other industries.
yeah,
Sometimes it feels like you are managing kids at points. If you get a good contractor, then you're fine. But some cases, we've had contractors just randomly leave a job and not turn up, or a half-finished job because they found a bit better job elsewhere, and it's just the professionalism maybe was lacking there. But these are things you've never dealt with before, so you're feeling like I've asked you to do something, I'm paying you, you should be able to do it. But these are just like part of the parcel of the challenges of learning, and you have that experience now. So then now you know what to avoid, but at that point you don't know what to avoid, so you just have so many hurdles that you have to overcome, and you find that really hard at that point in time. But now I look at that as you have to it's almost like your rite of passage in
yeah,
order
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah, yeah.
get into the next stage.
But do you also think, because one of the fascinating things I think about your story so far is in comparison to some of the kind of SaaS founder led businesses that I've spoken to who've been on that kind of that wheel of VC funding, growth, there's a speed element to it.
Yeah,
But you've taken your time doing this
yeah,
and the that's given you the chance to develop as a person because to your point as well maybe the person that you were then, like trying to handle and navigate the chaos compared to the person you are now, by taking the kind of maybe the longer route or the slower route has enabled you to do it at your own pace. And now you are probably much better equipped to handle that chaos because you've been able to balance it and manage it more effectively rather than sometimes I think people are just because they're growth. Like,
yeah.
do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get you. What's interesting actually, Mike, so funny enough speaking about the tech perspective or working even in tech or tech founders, I intentionally worked in tech because I wanted to take a fast forward thinking space and apply whatever it is they're doing there into an archaic, slow, like heavily bureaucratic
Yeah,
arena,
yeah.
and see how can I apply that. And I've seen the benefit of doing so because that's also helped with the forward thinking in terms of our innovation when we speak to landlords and they like our forward thinking approach. The systems that we put in place has really helped. But at that time, again, I didn't really know that's why I was doing that. It just happened to be something that I've taken from one arena and been able to apply to another. But then I started to see I actually love learning, like really love learning. If I'm in an arena in a space where I can learn and I can pick up what I call transferable skills and I
Mm,
can apply that elsewhere, then I know that I'm in a good space. And I didn't really find it frustrating the fact that we haven't gone down the VC route or created somewhat of even a prop tech kind of
mm,
company or solution. I just saw it as I've never been in business before. I've been
mm,
exposed to it because my mum had a business when I was a child. So
mhm,
I wasn't necessarily saying I'm going to go into this, but I was exposed to the entrepreneurial spirit, and just being an entrepreneur. But being in a space where I could learn and apply that, and apply something from a fast forward or a fast paced space,
Yeah.
for a better term, um, you know, that really fueled me. That really fueled me in terms of not being downbeat about going out and seeking investors to give us millions of pounds to be able to scale up. Plus, at that point, if someone gave me £1 million or so or plus, I wouldn't have an idea of what to actually do with it at the time. So I feel like because it was my own money and my co-founder's money, and we're putting into us
Mm.
in into the game, we had to figure it out ourselves. And now it's put us
Yeah.
in a position where we don't necessarily need out external funding, and if we do, we
Yeah.
know why we need it.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. The I think the route that you've taken, I said at the very beginning, of like working alongside is the less trodden path. And I think it's probably because primarily, I think actually it's probably because it's just not available to most. I think
Yeah.
most companies shut the door on that rather than see the major upsides to hiring somebody who has a lot of the skills and qualities that you want, as long as you believe that they can do their job. From your perspective, working at organisations like Ben and working with the founders there, people like David Duckworth,
Mm.
were there other kind of advantages, and maybe I don't, if you're happy to talk about them, if there are disadvantages at all to doing it alongside and trying to like balance the two that you experience now that you look back at it?
Yeah, there's definitely advantages and disadvantages, and I apply that in most situations. But with an entrepreneurial spirit, I saw more the advantages in the space I was going into, because I was in a more go-to-market role, focused on the
Mm.
commercial side, and I was the founding AE there at Ben. That enabled me to see, okay, this is a blank canvas. I've come into an environment where it's just founder-only sales. So what are
Hmm.
they doing? What are they doing that's going well and working, and what are they doing that's not working? So actually being able to give critical feedback to a founder. Sometimes you might walk into an environment and you're maybe speaking to the CEO or COO, and if it's a larger company, you're probably might be quite intimidated to go up to the CEO and say such things. And I saw that later on in my journey there, because probably by like year 2, year 3, people have come in and they're probably like the 120th employee that's come in now, and they're
Hmm.
not going to just walk up to David's desk and tell him, "Oh, I don't think that what you're doing here is right." But at that point, because I had that open communication with them, and
Yeah.
literally as David was my direct report, I could tell
Yeah.
him, I think we should be doing this better. And the
Yeah.
reason why is because I've seen this work in my previous role, and applying that and seeing that some your suggestions are being implemented. I found that was one, it validated that you have some sort of expertise in this area, but you're
Hmm.
also seeing what works and what doesn't work quite quickly.
Hmm.
So going back to that point of being able to pick up skills and apply that in a space where you don't know what you're doing, and then you're starting to figure it out, that was huge. So looking back on that piece, that was great. The disadvantages, I'd say, were maybe more so the fact that it wasn't necessarily the same industry. And
Yeah.
I think one of the things I always say is, for me, I take a lot of inspiration from athletes. Athletes are very focused on being the best athlete they can be. And if you want to be maybe the best operator or the best business person or entrepreneur in your space, or even whatever role it may be, you might not necessarily want to be an entrepreneur. You might just want to be the best at your role. You want to really obsess about that role and focus on it. And it almost feels like even during out work hours and outside of work hours, that's all you're doing. You're living and breathing it. Whereas I felt like when I was at Ben, I have to put on my Ben hat, and then
Yeah.
after hours, I could really just take on whatever's applicable to my business. But I then have to put on my real estate hat, and I maybe was lacking on maybe industry knowledge at times and having to do a lot more. But if I was immersed in the industry and working in it all the time, I don't think I would be at that disadvantage. So I'd say that's probably one of the main disadvantages of probably juggling what you might call a side hustle alongside a full-time job.
Yeah, I get it. I think the reality of most people not doing it is also they can't do it. That's the truth. It's really hard to be able to
Yeah,
balance and to get what you need out of both.
yeah,
So I think that there's definitely a reason there. And then nowadays, if you look at as a founder now and where you want to take the business, where do you go to? Who do you lean on to seek that skill, that experience that you don't have now? Because if I look at myself, one thing I realized a few years ago, and not having a co-founder in particular, was that I just sometimes it's quite lonely, and actually finding the answers and the skills that you, like you, I like learning. I want to improve. I want to get better. I want to
yeah.
knowledge, whatever it might be. I want to get the most out of whatever I'm doing. And so I realized I needed to find a mentor who could help me and challenge me a bit, give me some kind of accountability up rather than which ultimately I didn't have. But for you now, do you have anyone or do you have a thing that you do that gives you access to that knowledge and those skills that maybe you want to develop?
Yeah, yeah. So I have numerous coaches in different areas of my life. I'm very big on
Really?
actually having coaches. I think if someone's already done it before, has experience in this particular area, and you know this, and you know them, it you almost start saving time in trying to figure out that process and or figure out
Yeah.
that thing or problem you're trying to overcome. Even actually, just speaking on that, recently we hired a fractional CFO to come in and help on the financial side. So finance is one of the parts I'm accountable for. Now, that's not because of my maths background. So even if probably telling you about the time between loving maths to now, I'm not as great as I used to be. But actually having someone coming that has worked with really major companies, FTSE 100 companies, etc., and has been on numerous boards, worked with large organizations as well as small, medium-sized businesses, getting them on board and having them as almost a coach to help you understand different types of reports. Because at first, when you're running a business yourself, all you're doing is simple bit bookkeeping. You don't really understand what a P&L is or a balance sheet or
Hmm.
cash flow summary. These are just simple things now that I look back on them, but at the time it's not because you don't know what you don't know. And having a fractional CFO coming to break down the purpose of each one and how important they are, that's been huge. It's helped me understand our numbers a lot better because I feel if you
Mm.
don't know your numbers, then you don't know where you're going, and you're probably going to make more emotional led decisions than data backed decisions. So that's been absolutely crucial. And that's one of the recent hires that I think has been transformational in terms of how we're viewing the business today. I also have a business coach as well that just generally helps me in terms of just sometimes you feel a bit stuck. You just may not you don't always have all the answers, even though people come to you to
Mm.
expect to have all those answers. And
Mm.
sometimes you need someone to lean on just to have an outside perspective because the fractional CFO is almost inside the business but also outside,
Yeah.
whereas coach isn't in the business at all, but has context through your lens and also has well, so my business coach has exited from his own business. He's a lot older, but he helps entrepreneurs in similar age range as myself
Hmm.
and at a similar stage. And he's been absolutely instrumental in terms of just sometimes picking up the phone and bouncing an idea off that I don't necessarily maybe want to go to my co-founder about. You just want to have an outside perspective because sometimes you could, when you go to your co-founder, even though we catch up quite regularly and we speak regularly, we're still blindsided by what's within our industry in our space. So having that outside perspective has been absolutely huge. And I have fitness coaches, performance coaches as well in various other areas of my life, but those two have been absolutely critical. And then I also have a mentor that's funny enough a fractional CFO by professional and trade, but we didn't. I didn't involve him in the business because I wanted to keep him there just as my mentor. It just gives me overall guidance in terms of just
I get it.
stepping into the role of being an MD
Mhm.
in the company.
I need some more coaches. That's what I've learned from yeah.
Definitely. You don't want too many voices though, but you definitely want to make sure that you have a small council of
Mm.
trusted confidence and advisors that you can confide in.
I think that the I haven't spoken to a single person in a long time, like as long as I can remember, who hasn't talked about how important it is to find a a fractional or a full time finance expert, CFO. If it's a fractional CFO, I think that's for a lot of early stage businesses, that's the most obvious route to take, and it makes so much sense. But if I look back at some of the interviews I've done and an earlier podcast we did, I've spoken to founders and leaders who said we should have done that a lot earlier. And actually, if we
Yeah.
had have done, we wouldn't have had half the issues that we had. And then the people I've spoken to said we've done it earlier, just said transformation, and not just for the obvious reasons, like just for the broader business experience, acumen that comes with that is often misunderstood. I think that if you talk about fractional generally, we do fractional revenue leaders. I think there's a perception that people probably thinks that people think that means I'm hiring a fractional salesperson, but you're not. You're hiring the breadth of experience and knowledge around go to market, strategy, structure, process, everything. You hire a fractional CFO. You're not just hiring somebody who does your P&L at the end of and does your tax return. Being overly simplistic, the point is you're hiring a lot more. You're bringing a lot more into your business than just somebody who does your finance.
My co-founder and I, we used to go back and forth on this all the time. We used to be like, he used to think like the accountant and a fractional CFO are the same. I was like, they're not the same. Right? They can to some degree do some of the things that we need them to do. And I get it. When you're starting out, maybe all you need is an accountant and a bookkeeper.
Yeah.
Someone maybe to do your end of year taxes, and you could probably do the bookkeeping yourself. But eventually,
Mhm.
when you're thinking about scaling, these are things where you have to put the right people in the places they need to be in order to get to the next stage. I love as a child loved playing video games, and it's almost like you need to do certain things to unlock the next level. And you're not going to unlock the next level if you try and do things the old way. You have to adopt a new way in order to get to the next level and the next stage. And that's essentially how I see business. But having a CFO has enabled us to now look further ahead in terms of forecasting, also being a lot more mature as a business. You feel like a real
Mm.
company now because someone's actually sitting there and telling you this is sometimes funny because it's a business idea we thought of. I can still remember just sitting in my room and my co-founder calling me, is like, we should start this. And I was going away for a few days thinking of the company name, thinking of what we're going to do. Now you actually have someone there sitting there and telling you, this is your revenue, this is your metrics, these are some of the things that you should be doing and what your performance targets are against what your actuals are. And we would have never had that if we didn't bring someone like that in play, and it wouldn't have helped us get to the stage where we are today.
No. It never ceases to amaze me, but it makes so much sense. And like I say, I know loads of people doing that now. One of the questions I love to ask, and it feeds into the narrative, the name of the podcast is, and when Martin and I sat down originally, we were like, one of the questions we have to ask people is when it comes to building something or growing a business, and the question came out of the fact that we felt like there was a lot of noise and content on different platforms around how good it was and how great it was and all the success stories that come from growing and building something. But we were like, what's the biggest load of BS that you think maybe you had? Like some people I've spoken to have actually had it. They were like, I believed it would be this. And actually, it was nothing like this,
Yeah.
is something. Or they were like, we were told it was this. And actually, that's not. Or you read that it's this and it's not. But for you, what's the kind of, I don't know, like one or two things that you can look at and go, yeah, do you know what, that's just rubbish.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say the first thing that comes to mind is probably that more revenue means more success. And what I mean by that is I used to look at people screaming the revenue targets on the numbers they used to hit as, oh, we're doing 100,000 a month or 10 million a year. All right. You don't know what it may mean. But
Mm.
I've come from a mind of, is that even profitable or not? Because of the way our business is built, right? The way our business is built is we're funding ourselves. It's not, we're bootstrapping. So these revenue targets, of course, they're important, but they're not necessarily everything, and it doesn't equate to success. So
Hmm.
I've met businesses that have less revenue than us, but or more revenue than us, but less in terms of their profit margins. Because sometimes
Hmm.
you can look at the number in terms of the net profit figure, and that's different. But our profit margins are a lot better than theirs,
Mm.
and some are in the same space, some are not in the same space, and they're impressed by that. And I started to understand as I actually this revenue target, anyone can say anything. No one knows what that means really
Yeah.
until you actually really look at what their bottom line is. And even the bottom line, whatever they put out, is not always what it seems to be because they could reinvest those funds back into the business. So you start to look at this and whatever is defined as success, it's not necessarily revenue, it's not necessarily this profit margin, it's not that. It's generally what it is that you've set your business out to be, and
Hmm.
the target that you set out for it. So it goes back to that classic saying that don't focus on someone else is doing, just focus on what you need to be
Yeah,
doing to
yeah, yeah.
make yourself successful and not get hit by the headlines. Because being in the tech space is quite common. Someone could raise X amount, and while that's a significant milestone, it doesn't necessarily equate to a success. It's just probably a milestone. And yeah, celebrate a milestone, but don't always equate that to success. And that's something that I've been very big on recently. So yeah, I'd probably just say that's maybe the
Yeah,
biggest myth I've seen about scaling is, oh, revenue means more success, and it doesn't always mean that.
yeah. I think there's probably a lot of people over the last few years who started to realise that's the case as well. Definitely in tech, geez, the profit as a metric was certainly for a long time just not something that
Yeah,
was
no,
even talked about, and now it's talked about as much as it is in any other industry. Actually,
yeah,
we've covered loads, but one last question I'd like to always we spend so much talking around the challenges or the past or things that everything that you've done.
yeah.
But in the next 12 months, what does the next 12 months hold for the business? What are your what goals, aspirations, targets have you put in place to and yeah, what does it look like?
Mostly just execution. If I was just to summarize it in one word, it would be that, because we've built the foundation over the last, I say, 18 months. So hiring and continuously looking at hiring as well. But we feel like we have a solid foundation to help us scale into the next stage. And as I mentioned, when we first started, where it was more focused just on professionals, and now really helping out families as well and really incorporating community led housing, we were just really focused about ramping that up. So that's optimizing our systems that we built, growing a portfolio in terms of what we manage, and bringing in actual investors, because we've had a lot of interest from some investors that want to help us with scaling. And
Mm,
now that we actually understand and have the foundation in place, and then again having the CFO as well has been really crucial, because now we can go and apply for funding if we need to, and really
mm.
come across as a very mature business. That's helped us. So it's all about executing that now. It's great having all the ideas and all the plans of what we want to do, but it's now about putting it into fruition.
Again, the point of the CFO, I think, like I've seen companies when they've looked at that hire, they've really prioritized people who have been on the next stage of the journey, and maybe they're really good at they've got experience of raising investment. I think it's such a critical thing, especially you can be bootstrapping and chasing profitable growth, but at some point most companies are going to need investment, and actually if you've
Definitely.
never gone through that before, then you don't know what you don't know. And yeah, sure, you can do like we've already discussed, yeah, the avenues or way that you can like source information and being curious will take you so far, but nothing really replaces that proven experience of saying this is what you need and these are the avenues that are available to you. And we've seen that as a business as well, where I've been able to sit down with somebody and they've said, actually, do you know that you've got these different options that you could access if you wanted to?
Yeah.
I had no idea, like
I-
absolutely no idea.
yeah. And sometimes there's a cost to not knowing. I said this, like there's a cost to not knowing, even more so, probably even touching on like the CFO or getting a fractional person in place. It's adopting a philosophy of who, not how. It's
Mm,
not about you figuring out how all the time. Sometimes it just simply starts as who knows this, who knows how to
mm,
do this, and then starting there, because usually once you find the who, they know how. And the price to pay, you're going to pay one way or the other, whether you're paying with your time or you're going to pay with your finance. And I'd rather pay with my finance because I know that's abundant and that's going to come back, whereas my time isn't. And so having that foundational mindset and belief, I think that's been critical in terms of helping us over the past 12 months.
that is a great place to finish it. I think, yeah, we've covered loads. Really interesting stage for the business. Like I said, I just think that for people listening or watching this, understanding maybe that if you have that idea or you have that interest, then you can make that work alongside building your career and learning from that, taking what you need from it, but also giving loads into that as well, because that will all pay forward. And just, I'd say the path less trodden, really, of just like taking some time and learning and developing as a person along the way is something that hopefully people listening to this can take from this. And yeah, look, Andrew, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for
Definitely.
just sharing such.
Thanks, Lloyd. It's been fun.
Cheers, man.
All right, cheers.